Hey everybody, Ricky here. I try to go on adventures around my general area to learn the local history, and so I decided to head out to the Seattle Waterfront downtown. And before you freak out, yes, I brought my pepper spray and my stun gun thingy. So, the Seattle Waterfront is where the tourist trap stuff is. We got the Ferris wheel, the flying over Washington ride, the famous Ivar's restaurant, and my favorite place ever, the ye old curiosity shop. And it's not a very far walk from the Space Needle, but this is a history channel, and I know you don't care about how it is nowadays, plus you gotta go and bring protection if you go down there. So, when Seattle first started out, the waterfront was simply a beach, obviously. Then in the mid-1800s, the Denny Party landed across from the mainland Seattle where modern-day Alki Beach is in West Seattle. Soon more and more people came to this new area, including a guy named Yesler, Mr. Yesler. That was his last name, not first name. And he built a steam-powered sawmill. Logging, of course, became Seattle's main industry, selling lumber all the way to San Francisco and Hawaii. Soon, Seattle started becoming a typical new town, having problems with all kinds of things like flooding, sewage, and fires. After the railroad chose Tacoma over Seattle, the city decided to focus on shipping, which was perfect because of the Klondike Gold Rush, which was just like the gold rush in California, but Alaska. So, Seattle, being the gateway to Alaska, really did well shipping miners and supplies back and forth to Alaska. While focusing on shipping, Seattle's new port, the Port of Seattle, began trading with faraway lands like the Philippines, Japan, and China. Then World War I came, and by the end of all of that, Seattle's port was somewhat outdated, and the waterfront got a new seawall built, and of course the Great Depression came. And during that time, they worked on the waterfront, making it more stable, building a seawall, like I mentioned, and replacing a bunch of old wood, turning it into concrete. Plus building the viaduct, which they recently tore down, which was part of the freeway helping to bypass the downtown areas. And that really began the modern-day waterfront we know today. After World War II, the famous Edgewater Hotel was built, and it was in the 70s that brought about the shops and restaurants on the waterfront. Now, let's dial down on some of the specifics. First, we've got Ivar's.
Han en nyen.
Snart vil han lære våre veier.
Og vil spise åte ofte på Ivars.
Ja.
Ivar's was founded in 1938, but it was in 1868 that Ivar's parents bought Alki Point from Doc Maynard, who was an early Seattle businessman. So West Seattle is where he grew up. He started out as a folk singer. Ivar Haglund opened Seattle's first aquarium and decided to also open up a small fish bar. Eventually, the aquarium failed, but he was doing really good in the food business. So much so that a restaurant called Stevie's complained that he was taking all of his business away. So Ivar closed down the fish bar and opened up a new place called Ivar's Acres of Clams restaurant. And he took over what used to be the Galbraith Bacon and Company, which was basically like a Costco, putting Stevie's completely out of business. After that, Ivar went out to promote his restaurant by singing songs for people, hosting all kinds of events like a clam eating contest. He was always on the radio, going on stage, pulling stunts like walking around town, especially through Pike Place Market, with a seal dressed like a baby. He also made a clam stamp that the post office wasn't too happy about. One of the last things Ivar did before he died was in 1976, when he bought Smith Tower and flew a big fish windsock on the top. Now, let's go on down the waterfront and we come to Miners Landing. This is where the majority of the restaurants and shops are, as well as the Wheel and the Wings Over Washington ride is. The Miners Landing is called that because in 1897, a ship filled with excited and newly rich, successful miners docked in Seattle. And that's pretty much there is to that spot. The last place I want to tell you about is the Ye Olde Curiosity Shop. But first, I enjoy history of making these videos for y'all, and I hope you like them as well. And if you want to support my work, consider buying some of my coffee. I make small batch, specialty, fancy schmancy coffee at tranquilocoffee.com. Okay, back to the history. So, moving on to Ye Olde Curiosity Shop. It's my favorite place, but it's kind of hard to describe. But basically, if you've heard of Ripley's Believe It or Not, it's like that, but in Seattle and better. Joseph Edward Stanley was a guy who really liked to collect weird things. He once owned a grocery store in Denver, Colorado, but soon his weird collection outweighed his groceries, so he had to move his collection to Seattle. Moving there in 1899, opening up his curiosity shop. Not on the waterfront, but originally on 2nd and Pike. There's all kinds of things at this shop. There's a mummy, shrunken heads, a two-headed calf, all kinds of really cool things. The shop started out being called Stanley's Free Museum and Curio. Then he renamed the shop The Curio, and then it became Stanley's Curio. And when he moved to the waterfront, he called it Ye Olde Curiosity Shop. The Curiosity Shop is famous and has had a bunch of famous people visit, including President Teddy Roosevelt, Charlie Chaplin, Mr. Ripley from Ripley's Believe It or Not, and Chief Seattle's daughter, Princess Angeline, made baskets that were sold at the Curiosity Shop. Well, that just about covers the Seattle waterfront. Thanks for watching, and remember, learning is cool, but sharing what you learned is better. Share this video with your friends, and also consider checking out my podcast, Ricky's Historical Tidbits. In that show, I do one local story, then a historical tidbit from each of the 4 general areas of the United States: the West, the Midwest, the North, and the South.